keep it simple. You don't need fancy toys. We fill up the playmat with stacks of things for the babies. They don't actually need it. What they need
is engagement.
They need engagement and they need connection, and that's because that's what they're wired for.
Hi everyone and welcome back to No Place Like Home. I'm your host Larissa and I'm joined again today by the beautiful Robynne Klyne. Hi Robynne.
Hi, thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. We're going to chat today about attachment and bonding. Yep. So in the last episode, we chatted about your motherhood experience. So if you haven't listened to that, I highly recommend to go back and listen. It was such a beautiful chat. I really enjoyed it. But we're going to talk more today about your specialist area.
Yep.
Which you really enjoy, which is perinatal and infant mental health, focusing on attachment and bonding. Yes. Where did this interest come from? In amongst all of your nurse, midwife, IBCLC?
Yeah. So I had sort of mentioned in the previous episode that I had really noticed a big shift in birthing women.
Yeah.
And there was a real emphasis on recognising mental health as being an important aspect of, a woman's well-being before she even conceives. I think we still have a lot of work to do in this space.
Yeah.
But I really started to notice over my 16-year career how many women had particularly anxiety and depression before they had their babies, or it escalated during their pregnancy or after they had their baby. And there could be lots of different reasons for all of those things happening. But then, as a midwife working in clinical education, and I saw that there was this rise. I'm like, our midwives need more training. So that was part of my role, was to not only support graduate midwives and student midwives, was to provide education opportunities for our staff. And my colleague and I started to reach out to experts in the field. And we had 2 perinatal psychologists come and talk one afternoon to our staff. And at the time, it was an area of psychology that not a lot of people knew about. I didn't know, what is a perinatal psychologist? I was learning a lot about psychiatrists and psychologists, and that there were actually psychiatrists and psychologists that were specific to this area. I had no idea. And I've been a midwife for so long. And these 2 women came and spoke, and we had asked one of them to talk about attachment and bonding, which I didn't know much about attachment theory. And she showed us this video called the still face paradigm. And essentially it was an experiment that was done in America by a psychologist. I think it's Edward Tronick was his name. And he put a camera in to watch a mother and a baby, and the mother and the baby were face to face and they were engaging beautifully. And then the mother turns away and she looks back at the baby, but she makes no connection with her baby. So there's no eye contact, there's no engagement, there's nothing. She's essentially still faced, and the baby's doing all these things to try and connect with her. And then she turns away and comes back to repair that moment, and she re-engages, because that's the really important part, is that repair of that rupture. And I walked away and went, oh my God, these little babies.
That feels monumental.
It was a huge shift in my thinking, because I was like, what is this infant mental health? Babies' mental health? Why are we even worrying about an infant's mental health? And when I saw how interrelated it was with the parents, particularly with the primary caregiver, I was like, oh my gosh, we can make a really big impact for mothers and for babies
at those
early moments.
Stages.
And the thing is, when you notice when children are really struggling, and if we can help those neural pathways of those babies when they're so little and support that bonding, we can have such better outcomes for those little ones. So
it feels like, if again, for me, just as a mother, that feels like something that I never knew about,
Yeah.
but feels like one of the most significant things that I could know.
Yeah, it's so important. I think that what families don't realize is like the attachment and the bonding and the secure attachment, that's the important part, is having a secure attachment with your baby, is that starts the foundational work for your baby's brain and their mental well-being and their emotional and pro-social development. So
it also feels safe though, from like being that infant. Like that would feel safe have that connection.
Absolutely. And I think it's about making families aware that it's about being sensitive and responsive to their baby's needs and being able to learn, recognize how babies are communicating with them. And so often, we just see babies as kind of like this blank slate, but they're not. They're wired for connection. They're wired for interaction. They're seeking that from their caregivers. And I think what really challenges parents is they're often waiting for that feedback from their babies. And, they often find that it's once their baby starts smiling that they go, I finally feel like I have that connection.
Yeah, that's the
I have that connection point, or that point where they're like, oh, I feel like I'm getting that feedback now from my, I'm getting that feedback now from my baby. So it must mean that my baby's happy. But that can take 6 to 8 weeks, right, for that process to happen. But your baby's showing you all these different ways to communicate and connect with you before they can smile.
So what does that look like for new parents?
So for new parents, and I think it can be really varied, but what babies will do is the eye contact. So they'll actually seek eye contact. So those really deep eye gazes that, when bringing your baby, they can't see very far away. So bringing your baby up quite close and just eye contact, making facial expressions. So, like new babies will often poke their tongue out. Yeah. So mirroring their face, you can go and buy all these toys for your baby, but the most exciting toy for a newborn is their caregiver's face. So it's smiling and delighting in your baby, even things like gentle touch. But your baby will actually seek eye contact. And what they tend to do, though, when they've had kind of enough of that moment, is they might look away. So it's being able to pick up on, my baby's ready to connect with me, but now my baby's actually telling me, I just need a little break from that. So if you notice your baby might be looking away, just give your baby a bit of a moment. They'll come back to you. So it's kind of being curious about their world and seeing the world. It's all about like watching, waiting and wondering and just thinking, what are you thinking about right now? And it's okay. You don't have to be in their face and put toys in their face or it's just that real gentle delight in their being, because they don't really do much when they're little. So it is really, really hard for new parents to sort of pick up on those little cues.
Those cues.
And they'll often feel like see crying as their only form of communication. And I was like that too, because that's often what I would say to families is, don't be too worried about your baby crying. And they shouldn't necessarily be too worried because that's how babies talk to the parents. It tells you that I'm hungry or I'm tired or I've got a dirty nappy or I've got a tummy ache. Something is not right in that moment of time. And it's really important for parents to be sensitive and responsive when their babies cry, because if they go for prolonged periods of time where they're in distress and the parents are not responsive to that, well, then that can sort of lead to those attachment styles that are not, preferential sort of attachment styles. So it's important to watch those cues, but also watch the subtleties, is the baby like the jerky limb movements or even just, the eye contact and the face plays such an important role in those early days and weeks. But you can appreciate when women, are really struggling with their own mental health challenges, not only women, but also the partners, if they've got their own struggles. Well, if they don't have the capacity themselves to even, if they don't have the capacity, how are they going to have the capacity to pick up on their baby's cues? So, it's important that obviously your baby's fed and warm and all those physical needs. Those are very important. But if they're emotionally neglected, that can be catastrophic for those little babies too. So you can see how interrelated the two go.
Absolutely. And it's been coming up a lot lately, this concept of time that I've been thinking about, and it plays into so much.
Yep.
And sometimes time can be an illusion.
Yes.
And sometimes time can also be a really big negative thing that we emphasize and have as part of our days.
Yep.
And I think one thing that I've really been thinking about and plays into what we're talking about today is this allowance of giving mothers time. And I think this plays into, you know, maybe mums listening to this are thinking, oh my God, I don't have time to sit there and gaze into my child's eyes. And, you know, but if we allow ourselves the grace of time, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be these massive amounts of time.
No.
In those first few weeks, it can just be these really intimate moments. And that's enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
I mean, the thing is like it doesn't also, like it doesn't, responsibility doesn't have to be just on the birthing parent.
Yeah.
So we know that babies who have caregivers, whether it be the other parent or grandparents or people who are responsive and sensitive to their needs, are still going to form secure attachment. Okay.
Right.
So I think that really takes the pressure off that it only is the responsibility of the birthing parent. So I think that's really important to remember. In terms of time, I think it's also important to know that connection doesn't happen instantly for everybody.
That was going to be my next.
So, and I think that's really important for women to be reassured about, that it's okay that if you don't have that instant love or connection for your baby, that to worry that, oh, my baby's not going to have a secure attachment and it's going to be really detrimental. You know, I heard a perinatal psychiatrist once use the most beautiful example that he explains is that when you meet your partner, you don't necessarily fall in love the moment you lay your eyes on them, right? It takes time to get to know them and to learn their nuances and to learn about them. Well, that's the same with your baby. Yes, you've carried your baby for 9 months or early if you've had a preemie baby, but you haven't got to know your baby. You don't know what their temperament is like, and that plays a huge part in it too, with a baby's temperaments. But it's taking those small moments, because it could be eye contact when you're feeding. Now, some people will feel like, I haven't been able to successfully breastfeed, therefore I can't bond and connect with my baby. Now, breastfeeding is a real protective factor in bonding and attachment. We know that.
I certainly
we know that, right? And there's a lot of guilt and shame that are placed on women who really struggle with breastfeeding because they're like, I don't have that physical connection. But you can still look lovingly into your baby's eyes while you're bottle feeding a baby, right? It's not just about, because babies, when they're newborns, they don't have long awake windows. They're often very sleepy for those first few weeks. You're not going to get those long periods of play with them. So it might be things like during a breastfeed or a bottle feed, I'm going to maintain eye contact with my baby. I'm going to talk to my baby. I'm going to tell them what's happening when I'm doing a nappy change, right?
Yeah.
Tickling their feet or touching their toes or giving them a belly rub or something. Those little moments, you're connecting and bonding with your baby. Like those, delighting in them or copying their sounds. Because it's like you're pretending you're having a conversation. It's that like concept of sort of serve and return, which I'm happy to talk about a bit later. But it's like you're engaging with them. And then, sometimes you find that, and I feel like I'm not really answering your question properly, but
no.
Sometimes you have partners that'll say, I really want to give my baby a bottle because I want to help with the feeding, right?
Yes.
And when I talk to them and say, well, look, if you're going to do that, that's fine. You have to do what works for your family. But just remember, when you're doing like a bottle of breast milk, you're making more work for your partner because she then has to find time to pump and get the milk and like all that sort of stuff. It actually adds a layer of work. But the things like settling, that's the hard bit.
Yeah.
Like that's where you can really help is the settling. Finding a moment where you can connect with your baby on your own. So whether that be that your partner's job is to bath the baby, That is your time that you are just with your baby.
Yes.
Mum's not around.
Yeah.
But, bathing, that bath time is the most amazing time to connect with the baby because they're often awake and you get that rich, uninterrupted moment where you're just present with your baby. And I think that's the thing. It's about being present, and you don't have to be present 100% of the time. Like that's just unrealistic.
Yeah, but I think it's a really big misconception as well, and it's again another pressure that new parents feel that they have to be present all the time. And there's lots of external noise that come at parents, particularly at the moment. We have every form of every advice and every expert and every specialist, and there's a lot, and it's hard to decipher what feels right for you, or So I think the simplicity of what we're talking about today is so important because it's in the day-to-day things that you're doing as a carer, regardless if you're the main birthing person or partner or extended family, everyone can partake in all of this without the external noise, without the toys and the gadgets and the this. It's just the basic, simple care.
That's it. And I think it's by saying that it's a shared responsibility really takes the pressure off the primary caregiver. And it does get harder when other people start disappearing, because that happens, and you see that kind of around 3 to 4 months. I remember saying to you that's like the peak time when women seem to come to home, and what I've noticed when things kind of fall apart because people of partners have maybe gone back to work or family are not around
the new baby
as much. The new baby phase, it's all kind of gone, and that's when you can't be present 100% with your baby. It's not possible, particularly if you've got other children. You have to the number of times my third child fell asleep on the floor on a playmat because I was busy. I was helping, take my other one to the toilet, or I was making a snack, or I was doing something, and I couldn't sit on the floor with her for the whole awake time. It's just not possible. So I think it's making sure you have moments of time where you are present without distractions. So if you can do it for periods of the day where you're not distracted by your phone or the TV or something in the background, that you can just have those small windows where you've got that uninterrupted time with your baby. And hey, it could even be that you're going for a walk and the baby's in the pram and they're awake, and you're talking about what's going on in the environment. Or can you see that there's a bird over there, or there's a dog over there? Because all that talking really helps with their literacy development as well, and their and learning for them to speak. So those moments are really important as well. And it's very important that if you're having, if it's all too much, sometimes you need to step away. Sometimes you have days or moments where it's just like they haven't, particularly when they're crying is at their peak, and you haven't slept, and it's just everything is feeling like it is way too much. How are you going to have the capacity to be present with your baby when you are at your limit yourself? And I think that it's okay, and I often tell families it's okay to put your baby down somewhere safe, whether it be on the floor if you don't have pets or other children, or in the bassinet or in the pram, and walk away. Go outside, catch your breath, have something to eat, have something to drink, deep breathe, do some grounding exercises, because if your stress levels are up here, how are you at all going to manage your baby whose also stress levels are up here? How are you going to co-regulate and help your baby regulate?
Absolutely.
If you can't regulate yourself either. So I think that's really important for families to know that it's okay to do that, and your baby's still going to have secure attachment.
It's just a moment.
It's a moment in time. The problem becomes when it's that when there's the lack of sensitivity and lack of responsiveness to your baby in distress for a prolonged period of time. If it's an ongoing thing, is then the baby starts to learn, well, no one's going to come to me. No one's going to come to me and meet my emotional needs. So that's when it and that's more the experts of, developmental pediatricians and psychologists and, not me, who's just doing my study and my training in the area. And I'm not an infant mental health practitioner, but I think I'm just trying to reassure families that it's okay to sort of step away and have some time to yourself and try to regulate yourself.
on that, what
Yeah.
are things that we should avoid?
So I think it's, the most important thing is to being sensitive and responsive to your baby's needs, because there's a lot of evidence out there that shows the impact of emotional neglect on babies and their higher rates of mental illness as well.
Right.
And there's lots of studies and, research in that. And I'm not the expert in the area, but, they have looked at orphanages in Europe where children were given all they needed, like warmth and food and shelter and everything, but their emotional needs weren't met and they really, really struggled. Yeah.
Wow.
With it, they had high rates of mental illness and everything. And there's, they've done MRIs on babies with which children who experienced like trauma before the age of 3, and then they've done scans of their brain, and their brains are actually smaller than children who haven't experienced trauma. So it's very significant, the impact of in like insecure attachment or in like bonding that is not the optimum sort of bonding that you would hope for a little person. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I won't go into it because I feel like I'll get emotional, but I see that with my 2 children.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see sort of my circumstance and what I went through with Valentina, and I didn't do any of what we're talking about. And then with Sebastian, I feel like I did not all of it, but I did more, certainly more. And I see the differences.
Yeah.
Just talking today, I can see those differences in both of them. So, it's very interesting and something I'll probably go away and delve into.
Yes.
Delve into a bit more. When it comes to the connection and play, so we've talked a bit around kind of those newborn stages.
Yep.
What does that look like for, say, 3 to 6 month year old?
Yeah, so that really depends on where your baby's at developmentally, because all babies kind of develop differently. But usually around sort of 3 to 4 months, you start to notice your babies might start laughing and giggling. They're making a lot more new sounds and noises. So
I do that a lot here with bubs that come in at that age. I sit there and I just mimic their sounds and it's hilarious.
It's so
joyful.
funny. And they're awake for longer. They're more curious about the world around them. And it's really getting down to their level. So, if you're going to put your baby down for some tummy time, which is a great way to help strengthen their core and get them ready for crawling, because some babies by about 6 months might start to be commando crawling or crawling. Yeah. I don't have a lived experience. My babies were all bum shufflers and slow on the physical development. But, mirrors are babies love looking at themselves. So popping in them tummy time with a mirror is a great source of entertainment for a baby. Yeah. Or even get yourself on your tummy and go opposite them, so you're face to face. Like that's a really simple way. And then have a conversation. So it sounds like you feel ridiculous. I am going to say you feel so silly because they make all these different noises and you're like, oh, really? So tell me more about that.
I do exactly that. Yeah.
I had no idea. So you start saying like really silly things, but it doesn't matter. Or even like singing songs, and you don't have to know nursery rhymes. Nursery rhymes are great because a lot of them have got rhymes, and rhyming is a great way for developing vocab and literacy. And this is my husband, who's a primary school teacher, and he's very much about phonics. So we use a lot of rhyme in books, but even like reading books. Books is really good, and books with rhyme. So lots of reading books. You can set up even, I love doing this with tummy time and putting up like board books in like a semicircle and having them open, and they're up on their tummy, and then it helps them with turning from side to side as well.
Oh, that's a great
and then you can
idea.
describe what's in the picture. So you're like, I don't really know what to talk about with my little one, but look what's in the picture. And that can also help if you're like really struggling yourself with like your own mental health needs, because you're like, I don't really know, I don't have the capacity to have a conversation because I just feel a bit rubbish today. I'm not having a great day, but I can describe what's in the picture. Like I might have the capacity to do that.
That is a brilliant idea.
Even things like rattles, like shakers, things where they get the feedback, a simple toy that might get like an egg shaker because they're really light. By about 4 months or so, they start grasping and reaching for things. So, and even starting to roll. So putting things a bit out of their reach to encourage the rolling, or reaching up and grasping things. And just, it's lots of talking through it. Like and sometimes it can feel a bit monotonous and a bit boring at times. And babies get bored. Like they do get bored, and it's changing the environment that they're in, because sometimes like you feel a bit trapped in your house with a little one, particularly if their sleep is really poor and you're really struggling with sleep as well. You may not have the energy, but if you've got an outdoor area in like a little garden. So if you've got access to your own garden, take play to your garden. Like even just
because there's so much outside as well.
Moving them under a tree. They love watching the leaves and the movement of the shadows.
Yes.
So even taking play outside, they're hearing different sounds.
Yes.
They're experiencing the breeze on their face and on their body. So they're getting quite a lot of sensory nourishment just from being outside. So
without
books, take a play mat, even like lie on the floor next to them looking up. So being like, I wonder what you're looking at. Like, so trying to, it's all about being curious about what's going on for your baby. And sometimes you don't have to do anything. You can just watch and wait and wonder and just explore. Because if your baby's kind of looking away from you, they might be having a moment where they're just trying to regulate themselves and they actually don't want you in their face.
Yeah.
But,
there's quite a lot of feedback when you think about it, isn't there?
It's a lot of feedback, but if you don't know those cues, and again, if you're struggling with your own mental health, how are you going to pick up those really subtle cues when the clouds of heaviness and darkness are sitting so much on your shoulders? So you can see how there's such a struggle, and you're not going to have the ability. You might not even have the capability of eye contact with your baby, and then they become gaze avoidant. Yeah. So that's sometimes what you see with mums who are really struggling, and those babies may not smile and may not laugh because they haven't had that sort of feedback, what we call that serve and return. So that the baby's having a conversation with you. You hear it a lot, like being used as like a game of tennis or volleyball. So the ball's being served to you. So your baby's serving a form of communication to you, and then they're wanting you to return it back. And that's often an analogy that's used. And I know they're going to share, this is a really great TED Talk with a little girl, Molly Wright, that talks about serve and return. And it's beautiful, and it shows such a great example of serve and return. And it's such a simple concept, but like I think it's richer than just using an analogy of, sport. I think about it like a dance. Like to me, it's a dance, it's movement, it's staying on rhythm, it's staying on beat. And, some babies when they're tiny, that, period, that window of serve and return might be 10 seconds. Like it's not going to be very long. It might be that just my baby's feeding and they're looking up at me and I look down at them, and then that might be your and then it might be over. But then you've got a 3-month-old, right? And then they're awake for longer and they've got more attention span, and they start cooing, and you coo back, you comment, you reflect their sound, you copy them, and then they sort of blow raspberries. And then you blow raspberries back. Yeah. And that's when I talk about the serve and return. It's not just like a few bars of music. It's now becoming a symphony. Yeah. So, it's sort of becoming longer and more almost complicated, because you've already formed those beautiful neural pathways that are sort of setting your baby up for success. And now there's so much more richness in the way you are communicating with your baby. And there's going to be times when you miss it. You're going to miss the serves. Yeah. That's normal. Like we can't be there for every serve.
No.
But it's being present when the serve
is there
and recognizing that my baby's trying to communicate with me. They're like smacking the phone out your hand, or they're just like making the noises are changing from the cooing and the laughing to something a bit more like vocal, and they're reaching out. And that's where you'll see it. If any of your listeners watch the still face experiment, you'll see what that baby does to try and get their mother's attention.
I'm going to go and watch
it.
Now.
It'll give you chills, but go watch it. And they make all these sort of noises and physical actions to try get their parents or caregivers' attention, and then eventually they don't, and then they just stop. They look away because it's too distressing for them. So, but so again, it's not about being there for everything, but it's when you are there, being present in those moments, and just really like delighting in your baby, and keep it simple. You don't, keep it simple. You don't need fancy toys. Like, we fill up the playmat with stacks of things for the babies. They don't actually need it. What they need
is engagement.
They need engagement and they need connection. And that's because that's what they're wired for. They're wired for that connection.
We don't know enough about that.
No, we don't.
Do we? I feel like, I have loved talking about this because I feel like it's just a whole other world that for anyone listening will be like, right, okay.
Yeah.
It's just really simple. I don't need all the stuff.
So simple.
We will hear mums come in here, in those really early newborn stages, and one in particular recently said, I literally have a whole cupboard full of bunnies that people have given me. And I don't know, I'm going to donate them because I just don't know what to do. So, I think to speak to that, like it's the simple things that we need to do. So as someone who might know someone who's going to have a baby, maybe do things for the mum in those early stages.
Oh my gosh,
and don't
absolutely.
buy all the things for the baby, because it's those simple points of connection, as we've talked about today, that are actually the most monumental things that you can do for that child in those early few weeks and months.
Because I think that if you take the load off the mother or either parent, they have the ability to be
the capacity
to be with their baby.
Yeah.
And whether it even be that if they've got other children, I think the best gift you can give a new parent is your time.
Yes.
Rather than a physical gift. So if you can give them time, whether it be that you take the baby for a little bit so the mum can get a bit more sleep or can get a bit more rest or can have a shower or whatever it is, so that they can be the best version of themselves when they're with their baby, then that is
the
huge.
gift.
Like that is the gift. And it's sort of almost like giving women ideas of how to work with their babies, other opportunities where they can engage and bond with their babies in like not the most conventional ways. For example, grab your bouncer, put your baby in the bouncer when they're big enough for a bouncer and bring it into the bathroom while you're having a shower. They're going to love watching the water flow down the shower and hear the sounds of the shower. You get to have your shower. You're going to feel better with yourself. You're still providing an opportunity. You can talk to your baby while you're in the shower. You're still providing an opportunity for serve and return and connection with your baby, but you still have to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Or, pop the bouncer in the kitchen
everything.
on the kitchen bench if it's safe enough to do so. And cook with your baby, talk about what you're doing. I'm busy chopping the carrots right now and we're going to have this for dinner. And it doesn't matter if you feel silly, you kind of get over that silly feeling, or sing to them, like sing while you're doing something. It doesn't matter if you're making it up. Who cares? Like that you are connecting and bonding with your baby, doing the most like mundane activities,
basic
things, but you get stuff done, your baby gets your interaction and attention, and they're not just left lying on the floor, by themselves for hours with no one connecting with them. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. I don't know about anyone else out there, but I mean, I'm 11 and 9 years postpartum, but I feel like I've even gotten so much out of this, knowing my experience early on, but also now, even with my 11 and 9-year-old, even understanding ways of simple connection with them now at 11 and 9.
Yeah.
Like, I've learned so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
I have enjoyed this so much. We are going to put all of the links that we've talked about in the show notes, so everyone can jump onto that, and we will also put Robynne's Instagram handle and other ways to contact you as well.
Amazing.
Thanks again,
Pleasure.
Robynne.
Thank you so much.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.